I always wanted to learn Italian. You know, when you're in, this is like, books are like your lifeline to the world, you know? I had started getting into like memoirs and biographies just to learn about other people's lives. Like this would have been something that interested me. Ted Kennedy, not because it's Ted Kennedy, but because it's like the story of somebody's life, you know?
You never thought about writing a book yourself?
Oh, no. Oh, no.
Any reason for that?
It just don't think that it would be as interesting to other people. You know, I feel like it would only target a certain audience, you know? My name is Kelly Dara, and at the age of 17, I was charged with first-degree murder, conspiracy to commit robbery, and attempted robbery. It was March of 1995, and my boyfriend at the time was who I thought I was going to be with forever, and so anyway, I don't really want to go into details of the story, but it was just me looking for love and acceptance in all the wrong places. And anything more than that can definitely be read on the internet. I'm sure your viewers will look me up, and I'm sure that they will see it. And I'm not going to try and justify my actions because somebody died. And I inflicted pain on families, wounds that will never heal. And out of respect for ripping those wounds open, I'm not going to sit here and try and sugarcoat it, clean it up, put a big red bow on it, and present it like it was just another thing. It wasn't just another thing. And I should have gone to prison. I should have.
All right, good deal. I do this thing where I like to make it awkward in the beginning. It kind of breaks the ice. Like this awkward silence.
Awkward silence has never really bothered me.
Kelly, how you doing?
I'm doing great. How are you today?
I'm doing well. I appreciate your time. You and I just recently met at a Reentry event, and when I heard your story, I was just absolutely blown away. You're a phenomenal speaker. You have been through a lot. You've been given a new lease on life, something that I imagine that for a long period of time you probably never thought that you were going to get.
No, never did.
Let's talk about that real quick as we begin this. You were incarcerated for a long time, and we'll talk about numbers in a little bit, but being in prison, feeling like you were never going to be released, and then all of a sudden laws change and there's a potential that you could be released. What does that do to your mind?
It, full discretion, kind of mind fucks you a little bit. You get to a point after a couple of decades where you settle in and decide, well, this is where I'm going to be, so I'm going to make the most of it. And you do everything that you can to establish a life in prison, in the best way that you can. And then all of a sudden this law changes and it gives you this newfound hope. And so you have to switch your mentality from being institutionalized for life to the possibility of going home. And you have to change your thinking, and you have to change your actions, and you have to change how you approach prison type situations, and whether or not you're going to remain in that prison headspace, or if you're going to rise above it and live your life like you really are going to go home. It's tough.
I can't even imagine, honestly. But I want to say this, for anybody who sees you, and there's going to be a lot of people who are seeing you in this video for the very first time, looking at you, there's no way that anybody could imagine that you're somebody who spent nearly 30 years in prison.
Yep.
And you've just been released now for a little bit less than a year.
Yeah. Just shy of a year. And I did, we'll just round it up, 29 years. 28 years, 11 months to the day. 1 month shy of 29 years. Yeah.
Let me ask you this.
Yes.
Going back to the fact that you were serving life, and it was life without the possibility of parole, right?
Yes, it was. It was life under Virginia's no parole law. So they abolished parole in January of '95, and I was arrested in March of '95. So I was completely ineligible for parole.
And that's a whole nother can of worms that we're going to get to in just a little bit.
Absolutely.
But the reason I ask is because you're living your life a certain way, serving life in a Virginia prison, and then all of a sudden they change some laws and you're now eligible for parole. What were you living like when you were serving your time, feeling like you weren't going to be released? Was it a totally different way versus knowing that there's a possibility that you're going to get parole? And when you think of somebody who's serving a life sentence, I think of somebody who just doesn't care, doesn't have anything to lose. How were you as a prisoner with a life sentence? Were you out of control, getting into trouble, like not caring, or?
At the very beginning, I really was. I was a knucklehead. I was one of those young people in prison that nobody wants to be around because they don't care, and they break all of the rules, and they break them openly, and the staff doesn't want to deal with them. And, you're just constantly being punished for what it is, for all of the rules that you've broken. But with life without parole, who cares? Like, you can give me all of the institutional charges that you want, and there's really no consequences for my actions. Like, what are you going to do? You're going to take my commissary, or you're going to take my rec yard privileges? You're not going to take a release date because I don't have one. You're not going to take, a parole date because I don't have one. Like, and my mindset for real, and I said it over and over again for years, was, what are you going to do? Take away my birthday? Because there was nothing that they could do. So I did live the majority of my time at the very beginning in that mindset. But as I got older, I switched it. I switched my mindset where I was still breaking the rules, but I wasn't blatantly disrespecting the staff. So as I grew up and matured, like, my choices changed. So I chose to be a better inmate, I guess you could say, and I chose to follow the majority of the rules. But, truth be told, some of the rules are just stupid, and I know that rules, I'm not trying to minimize rules, I'm not. But some of the rules that are set in place, like, they really are stupid. If I go to the chow hall for dinner and I have an apple on my tray and I know that I'm going to be hungry later, if I put that apple in my pocket and bring it back to the wing and I get caught with it, I'm getting an institutional charge. It's a stupid rule. Like, you want me to go to bed hungry? So, those minor infractions are the ones that I still didn't follow. But like the major rules, the ones like the fight-in rules and the, not standing for count rules, these ones that actually affect everyday process inside of the prison, yeah, I followed those rules. And because I followed those rules, I started moving up in respect in the eyes of the staff. And because of that, they started treating me nicer, and I was able to get better jobs and into classes and into, vocational trainings, because I changed my own outlook of, I don't give a fuck, there's nothing you can do, to, I can either live my life, what's the word I'm looking for? I can either live my life on the bottom of the barrel where I'm constantly in a spotlight because of my horrible actions, or I can rise above that and live a happy life and a comfortable life, even though I was going to be incarcerated for life.
Really good way of explaining things. And I had mentioned before we started filming, you are a powerhouse of a speaker. I saw that when I first met you at the Reentry program, where you and I first came into contact. I asked that question about how you were as a prisoner prior to the eligibility of parole versus after the law was changed. And the reason that I asked that is because it's so important. Because had you been a prisoner who was constantly getting into trouble with a life sentence with nothing to lose, even after the law was changed and you were eligible for parole, I'm sure you would have had a lot of regret about the way that you were carrying on, because now that's probably going to affect you actually making parole.
Absolutely. And don't get me wrong, like, I didn't change my mindset and the type of person that I was when I became eligible for parole. I changed my mindset years before I ever had any hope of getting out. Like, the things that I did to better myself were not to look good for the parole board, were not to look good for a governor that may release me. I did that for myself because I wanted to be a better person, and because I had my family in my corner the whole time. And I wanted them, regardless of where I was, I wanted them to be proud of me. So they could say things like, well, my daughter graduated from college, and my daughter can, do plumbing with her eyes closed, and my daughter can manufacture lenses for glasses, and, she's not, she's taken anger management, and she's taken all of these breaking barriers and all of these classes just to improve herself, for herself, not to impress anybody else. I didn't do it to impress anybody else. I did it to make myself and my family proud.
Good for you.
Thank you.
Let me ask you this. It brings up a good point, what you're sharing there. First of all, can you do all of those things? Could you do plumbing with your eyes closed?
I can.
So you took a plumbing trade while you were in there?
I took a plumbing trade, and I worked for a master plumber for 10 years and was basically his apprentice for 10 years. So
while in prison?
While in prison, yes.
It was a maintenance job? Or
it was a maintenance job, yeah.
Good for you.
But it was plumbing specific with him. So the way that they do it was that, there's a group of guys that are the supervisors, and then, they come in and they pick up who they want to work with for that day. And the plumbing guy just happened to have great confidence in me and my skills and picked me up all the time.
Good for you. And I
Thank
know
you.
that the eyeglass, the obtrution thing, I believe is what it's referred to. I know that the obtrution class is I believe it's just a female thing. I think that the women, I don't know that the men get that, because I know that there's certain trades that, and certain things that women get versus what men get, and obviously certain things what men do that the women don't get.
Right.
Maybe it is both. I I can't remember. But good for you for doing all of those things.
Thank you.
Throughout the course of almost 3 decades that you spent in prison, how often was it brought up or thought of by you that they're going to change the laws? How often were you hearing, oh man, did you hear they're going to bring back parole? They're going to bring back 65%. Did that give you a lot of false hope hearing those things?
The first couple of times that I heard it, yes. I heard it every 6 months for like my last 10 years there.
Bringing back parole?
Bringing back parole, giving
65?
people 65%. But it didn't, the first couple of times it did give me a little bit of false hope. But then as I read into it, whether they pass it or they didn't pass it, it wouldn't affect me. Because the parole that they kept saying that they were going to bring back was for nonviolent offenders. And the 65% only applied to people that earned good time. And with a life sentence, you don't earn good time.
And that's another thing that I want to touch on. Mm-hmm. People looking at you would find it hard to believe that you served almost 30 years mm-hmm. in prison. Another hard thing would be to hear this stigma that's been placed on you that you're a violent offender.
Yeah.
And I probably shouldn't even say it like that. Let me just cut to the chase. What you did was a violent thing. Let's talk about what led you to prison. And I know that this is a topic that you don't want to go into depth about. So just tell us, what you were charged with, what you did in your own words. How old were you? What year was it? How much time did you get? And you know what? And I want you to do it like this. Forgive me. Because, like I say, we bounce around while doing this. This is probably going to end up being the intro of the video. So if you would say it like, my name is Kelly. I'm going to say it wrong. My name is Kelly.
Dara.
Boy, I'm about to say Dara.
Like Sarah with a D.
My name is Kelly Dara.
Dara.
I did it again. Introduce yourself. Tell us what led you to prison in your own words.
My name is Kelly Dara, and at the age of 17, I was charged with first-degree murder, conspiracy to commit robbery, and attempted robbery. It was March of 1995, and my boyfriend at the time was who I thought I was going to be with forever, and so anyway, I don't really want to go into details of the story, but it was just me looking for love and acceptance in all the wrong places. And anything more than that can definitely be read on the internet. And I'm sure your viewers will look me up, and I'm sure that they will see it. And I'm not going to try and justify my actions because somebody died. And I inflicted pain on families, wounds that will never heal. And out of respect for ripping those wounds open, I'm not going to sit here and try and sugarcoat it, clean it up, put a big red bow on it, and present it like it was just another thing. It wasn't just another thing. And I should have gone to prison. I should have.
Thank you for sharing that, and I know that that's not easy for you to do.
No.
Kelly, at 17 years old, you were charged with first-degree murder, like you had mentioned. Mm-hmm. You killed someone. Mm-hmm. You got sentenced to life. What's interesting about your story amongst so much is the fact of when this took place. It was March of 1995.
It was.
In January of 1995, the state of Virginia passed new law. And what that related to was that prisoners who were sentenced after January of 1995 would no longer be eligible for parole in the state of Virginia.
Yes.
3 months later, here you come with a murder charge facing a life sentence. You would be one of the first, and I'm sure there were plenty of others as well, unfortunately, but you were certainly one of the first people in the state of Virginia to be sentenced under that new law legislation, which would make you ineligible for parole.
I was actually the first female in Virginia sentenced to life under the truth in sentencing law. Juvenile. First juvenile female.
You were 17 years old.
I was 17. And the other reason why I don't want to sit here and try and justify what happened that day is because I'm going to pose a question to you and anybody else that sees this. Are you the same person that you were at 17 years old?
I've heard that question posed before on the internet, and there's going to be two sides to that. You know, there's going to be the people that feel you're not, and there's going to be the people who feel that it doesn't matter because it's what happened.
It is what happened.
And the victim doesn't get the chance to be a different person.
No. But
So I just answered that in a devil's advocacy type of a way, and just knowing what the internet is going to say.
yeah. Well, I wouldn't be sitting here if I wasn't prepared for what the internet is going to say. And my response to all of that is that the only people that I have to justify my actions to are the people that are directly affected by it. I had to justify my actions to the judge, the lawyer, the parole board. And when I die and I stand at the pearly gates, I have to do it then too. Anybody else, if you judge me, that's fine. You're entitled to your own opinion. I know who I am. I know who I was. And I'm not going to be one of those people that say, I didn't do anything. Like I said, I should have gone to prison.
Well, let's immediately jump to the fact that you're released right now.
Sure.
You've
Sure.
only been released.
Let's get to that.
Let's get to a little better place here.
Yeah, that's fine.
And forgive me for that, but that's so important to your story. We're not sugarcoating any of this. And I appreciate you for being game to do just that.
Absolutely.
You are free again. You've only been released for less than a year.
Yeah.
And the reason why you were free is because back in 2020, 2021, you'll know better than me, Virginia changed the law and said that, you know what? If you were sentenced to a life sentence as a juvenile, you cannot be denied access to parole. And you served almost 30 years in prison. I know people with murder charges who serve less than that. I know people who serve way less time who are deserving of way more time.
I do too.
Interesting to note, just a little fodder and footnote to all of this, that legislation that was passed that has you sitting before us right now also makes Malvo eligible for parole. And for those of you who may not know who Malvo is, Malvo was a very high-profile case here in the state of Virginia, the D.C., the DMV, as it's referred to, the little triangle area between Maryland, Virginia, and D.C. One half of the D.C. snipers. His stepfather was executed years ago, but Malvo is still sitting in a Virginia prison right now, and he's also eligible for parole due to the fact that he was a juvenile when he was arrested and sentenced. Completely, a totally different can of worms. I just wanted to mention how that law, the implications that law has had.
Can I respond to that?
Please.
Just because you're eligible for parole doesn't mean you're going to make it.
I've worked with people here, people who know better than me, who have seen. I mean, This is a whole topic for a whole. Because
Yeah,
not
absolutely.
Absolutely. Not only did that law change saying that if you were charged as a juvenile, and maybe it was just that, but I know that from the year 2021 and after, a whole lot of people were released who were never coming home. And I don't know if all of them were charged as a juvenile. Maybe so, because they were all locked up for 30 years as well, too. So, there is that possibility. But Virginia certainly has, over the course of the last 5-6 years, been releasing people who were never going to be free again. And we've introduced quite a few of those people here on After Prison Show. Kelly, you're the first woman that I've ever met who had a life sentence. And you don't even look like you've ever been to prison.
Thank you.
You got any tattoos?
Plenty.
Do you really?
Plenty of tattoos.
Oh,
yeah.
We got to do a tattoo reveal at some point.
Oh, well, some of them I can't reveal.
We're going to have dudes like, hey, yo, I can save her. Give me your information. I promise you. Kelly, watch what I tell you. You're going to get some pen pals out of this.
Okay.
That's a whole topic for another.
That's a completely different show. I do want to back up with the amount of people that have been released in Virginia. So a couple of laws came into effect right back to back from each other. It was the juvenile law, the Fishbeck law, that allowed people that were sentenced by a jury between a certain amount of years to be eligible for parole because juries weren't aware of the amount of time. And then there was a new one, a good time release bill, where they brought back a certain amount of good time for certain charges. But with that being said, again, just because people don't just automatically up and get released, in my personal opinion, especially on parole. There's plenty of people that I know, women in particular, who have been going up for parole way more times than I ever went up that still have not made it. And that's due to their own mindset, their own actions, things that they have done. So it's not about manipulating your way out of prison. That's not how it goes down. You actually have to earn that release, if that makes sense.
I need to do something real quick. I need to change that mic because that mic fell over and I don't like that. So I want to keep it. Keep it right there.
Yeah.
Regardless, I've got this mic on. I just worry about your hair. Could have.
Oh, I can get it out of the way. How about
No,
that?
you're good. You're good. No
it
worries.
It was probably me leaning over. Trying to be all cute.
Go ahead, girl. Hey, look. Let me just cut to the chase, man.
Yeah, no, you're
I told
fine.
you, I said, look, you're the home run here on After Prison Show. You're a woman. You served a life sentence. You were 17 years old when you caught that life sentence. You had a murder charge. The law changed 3 months prior to you catching that. And then, look, no disrespect to my wife, but you're an attractive woman. And there's going to be guys who are watching this who are like, I'm not even going to say nothing.
You don't have to. You don't have to.
Damn wicked.
I'm not naive.
All right, cool. So, look, I do this completely professional.
Yeah, I know.
But that will make the final cut, is that little interaction right there. And I just like to call it for what it is. There's going to be so many people who are intrigued by you, your persona, your story. You've just been released. You've only been released. When were you released?
February.
It ain't even been, almost 10 months now?
Yep.
This is your first Christmas
It
that you're
is.
getting ready to celebrate.
It is.
Last Christmas, what were you doing?
Last Christmas, I was doing Reentry. I was, what did we do last Christmas? God. So once I made parole, because I had made parole in September of 23, and so it all, the next 6 months just became like a whirlwind. Things started happening really, really fast, and I think, we had a wing party. We had a community party for Christmas where we did line dancing and face painting. And
In prison?
In prison. Mm-hmm.
Yo, man, I'm going to be honest with you. Prison is totally different from back in the day.
Women's prison is totally different than men's prisons. Totally different.
There's so many questions that I could ask, and I've asked other women who have been on After Prison Show, but we'll save that for another time.
Yeah.
Just silly little stereotypes or urban legends that you hear about the women's prison. But I'm going to keep this completely Dateline for this first introduction. Real quick, let me ask that too. Did Dateline ever try to do a story on you?
No.
Did anybody ever try to do a story on you?
No, nobody tried to do a story on me. And I mean, the local news did, but I turned them all down because nobody wants to talk about the worst day of their life.
Like I had just asked about the Dateline, the reason I ask is because when you watch Dateline, your story is exactly what they feature. You are somebody that they probably would have loved to have done something with. The reason I can say that is because when I looked you up, like everybody else will, there are a lot of details surrounding what actually took place with your case. We've addressed what we need to address. We've addressed why we're not going to address anything more in relation to that. But again, if people want to know more about you and what led you to prison, it's certainly on the internet for them to be able to find.
It certainly is.
I mean, it could even be a damn not a Dateline, but a Lifetime movie. It's just wild. But let's go ahead and move on. They bring back the eligibility for juveniles to go up for parole. I'm sure when you see that that's now available to you, you are probably like, oh my God, there's a possibility I could be released. How many times do you go up for parole before you're actually granted?
3.
What were the reasons for denial the first 2?
Serious nature of the crime.
Release at this point would diminish the...
Release at this point would diminish the crime. And something about not being ready to... the board concludes that you need to serve more of your time.
So let me share this with you. This was actually a really big topic a couple of months ago here on After Prison Show. Me and a guy named Banky, who did a lot of time. He did 33 years, and now he's out and he's doing fantastic. He's got a big YouTube channel. Shout out to Banky. But we were talking about parole. Do you know that when they deny people parole, those are cookie cutter answers that they put for everybody?
It's a drop-down menu that they just pick.
The release at this point would diminish the serious nature of this crime. Not served enough time, institutional record, whatever. There's probably 7 of these answers that they just pick and choose and
Pick and
weed through.
choose.
No matter what you go in there and say or do, you go up 3 times, you're granted parole the 3rd time. When you find out, when you receive that letter, because isn't that how you find out? How do you find out?
I found out because the chairman of the parole board at the time set up a Zoom video. And I had waited almost a year for my answer because the parole board was going through with the new governor and him firing everybody on the parole board and then bringing in new people. And then
was it, and forgive me for interrupting.
Yeah, you're fine.
People say that that's my worst trait is I interrupt people,
That's
but
fine.
I want to catch this quickly. Was it the Zoom call that you received, was it from the old chair of the parole board who was fired with everybody else, or was it from the new one?
It was from Chadwick Dodson, the one that's now
The head of the DOC.
the head of DOC.
Holy moly.
Yeah, so we had and by then I had already been through my initial interview and then 2 follow-up interviews as the parole board went through changes. So there's this little conference room in the administration building, and it's just me and a TV, and there he is, and he's talking to me, and he's it turns into where I start feeling it's just a 3rd interview, and this is September, and people go up quarterly. So my quarter to go up for parole was starting in October. So as he's going through his questions and I'm settled into, this is just a 3rd interview, at the very end, he said, do you have any questions for me? And I said, yeah, my first question is, if I don't have an answer in the next couple of weeks, will I be going back up in October? And he said, well, you'll have your answer very soon. And I was like, okay, still not clicking. And he said, do you have any other questions? And I said, yeah. I said, it's a very inappropriate question, but I'm going to ask it anyway. Can you tell me how everybody's leaning in their votes? And he started laughing, and he said, well, I just want you to know that in answer to your question, all 4 people are leaning towards yes. We've all voted yes, and you're going home.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. And this was after like a 30-minute question and answer session.
They knew they were going to release you prior to you even going.
Yeah, they had already voted.
Yeah.
They had already voted, and they had already certified the answer.
So from there, everything snowballs. They shuffle you off to reentry.
They do.
Hey, we need to get you prepared in 6 months to go home after you've just served 3 decades in prison. I'm sure that was a whirlwind, and we could spend so much time on that too. I need to bounce around.
You're fine.
Let's talk about you getting released and what you've done in this time, because this is something that's very near and dear to your heart. You didn't just come out here without a plan. I mean, you got released and you hit the ground running,
I did.
which is insane.
I did. So the one thing that I couldn't do was serve 3 decades in prison and then just walk away from it. I couldn't, because there's so much that happens that people don't know about, and so let me back up. When I became eligible for parole, an organization called the Campaign for the Fair Sentencing of Youth was working with lawyers doing pro bono work for the juveniles that were suddenly eligible for parole. And so the campaign got me a pro bono lawyer that helped take me up for parole, prepare me for it, and the whole 9 yards. So once I was released, they asked me to attend like an event for people that had been, for juveniles that had been released. Well, I couldn't make the event because I wasn't driving yet, so, which is another story altogether. I didn't even have an ID at that point in time. So I spoke at the event through Zoom, and I met somebody named Taj, who is the chairperson for a nonprofit organization called the Humanization Project. And so I have been working with the Humanization Project since March, like a month after my release.
You're an employee of them? Like,
Yeah.
This is your job?
It's one of my jobs, yeah. I'm actually, my official title is the Advocate for Women Behind Bars, is my official title with the Humanization Project.
And talk a little bit about what your day-to-day consists of with that.
So mostly the day-to-day is research, finding stories of whatever it is that, whatever the topic is that we're trying to bring to the forefront at that time. Right now, what we're working on is the importance of staying connected with people who are behind bars. Because, I don't know if you're aware of this or not, but there's a drug epidemic out here as well as in there. And so when people get caught with drugs in there, their punishment is to lose visitation and access to the telephone. So it cuts off all communication with your loved ones and the people on the outside. In some aspects, it's understandable. In other aspects, it's a little bit too much if it goes on for 2 or 3 years. So right now, that's what we're working on. There's a film called Calls from Home about it, and we've had several events, one in Roanoke, one in Richmond, one at Christopher Newport University, basically trying to humanize the experience of being cut off from your loved ones for such a long period of time, because everybody says that community support, loved one support is like the basis of reentry success. And if you cut that off, what happens? So right now my day-to-day is like I reach out to people on Facebook who have, loved ones that are incarcerated, that have lost visitation. I find out why. I find out how long. And then, we have meetings and we discuss strategy throughout the week. And but it's a lot of research and it's a lot of footwork, but it's so worth it.
Good for you.
So worth it. Thank you.
The same month that you're released, you get knee deep with the Humanization Project, and that's what you do now.
That's what I do.
I'm going to ask one final thing, or we're going to talk about one final thing
It's fine.
as we wrap this up.
Yeah.
Look, there's 1,000 videos that we could do. There's so much that we could do, and I just hope that, we are able to do so and do what my hope is with this, to get your story out there to the masses, for you to have a social media presence if you choose to do so. And forgive me, we're going backwards big time right here.
It's fine.
You're released, you get parole after the third time, but there's the victim's family who does not want to see you get released.
Yeah.
And I want to bring this up because of the fact that when people look you up, this is something that they can find, and I certainly found it.
Yeah.
They made a petition for you to not be released.
They did.
How does that, how did that affect the parole process? Or what do you want to say about it? I'm sure, is there anything that you want to say about it? I'm sure it's something that you think about, and I'm sure it's something that probably even fills you with a sense of purpose to be out here, because you've been given this new lease on life, to just do the most that you possibly can, that much more.
I want to say that if the roles were reversed, I wouldn't want me released either.
That's powerful.
Yeah, I don't harbor any ill feelings towards the victim's family. Because like I said, if the situation was reversed, I'd be doing the same thing. Probably a little louder.
And let me just reiterate something that we mentioned in this. We talked about what your incarcerated life was like, serving life prior to being eligible for parole versus after realizing that there's a glimmer of hope. You had decided at some point long before that even became a possibility for you that you were going to try to make the most of the time that you were serving. So good for you for doing that.
Thank you.
Good for you for not giving up when many others would and do. And, congratulations to you for what you've accomplished since you've been released.
Thank you.
In this short period of time. And I know you got a lot to offer with this new lease on life.
Thank you. That means a lot.
Kelly, we're going to wrap it up right here. It's been an absolute pleasure. I look forward to sharing more with you. And I look forward to talking with you again real soon.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Thank you.